Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. Now for about the last year and a half or so, I've done quite a bit of wood turning and I've gotten fairly decent at it, but I've only ever actually turned one bowl, and that was one of the first things I ever did on the lathe, and I've pretty much forgotten everything I learned about it at the time. So for today's project, it's going to be a bit of an experiment for myself. Rather than doing a bunch of research and trying to figure out how to do this, I'm just going to kind of stumble my way through it and see if I can have a bowl at the end. So, if all goes well, this will be a pretty short, sweet video. If I stumble a lot and have to learn a bunch of lessons, then I'm going to take you along and teach you those lessons while I do it. The whole thing's going to start with this big cherry burl that came off of a tree that my dad and I cut down about 2 years ago. So it's nice and dry. You can actually see it cracked almost all the way through, but it did it on the side that was away from the burl. So I should be able to cut a good section out of this using the bandsaw. Then we'll throw it up on the lathe and we'll start turning. So the first thing I'm trying to do is get a flat spot on here somewhere, and the way I'm going to do that is by putting a flat board just across the flattest section of this thing and screwing it in so that it's semi-perpendicular to that cut mark, because that's what we're going to try to follow. So I'm going to set this a little off center and just put a screw in there. So that actually looks pretty good to me. And a little bonus that I wasn't planning on is that this flat side is actually just about flush with the edge of that burl, so I can probably just put this right up against the fence on my bandsaw and just take a straight cut at this. Well, that definitely didn't go as smoothly as I had hoped it would. I think it was a combination of maybe too little power in the saw and probably the wrong blade for the job, because it took a lot more work to get through this than I expected, which makes me a little nervous for later on, because we're about to turn it sideways and try to cut a circle out of that. So I just threw together a really rudimentary circle cutting jig for the bandsaw here. It's got a runner on the bottom that slides in the miter track and allows me to push the workpiece into the blade. Then it's got a lip on the back end here that stops when it hits the front of the tabletop. Couldn't think of words. I have a kerf in here for where the blade stops, and from that I could draw a straight line out the edge. And that's going to be the line where any size circle I need to cut has to pivot on that line. And then I put a nail in here as the pivot point for the size blank that I can get out of my piece of wood. And then there's a hole in the piece of wood that will slide down onto that nail. And of course, the nail was right in line with the runner, so I had to accommodate for that a little bit. So now all I've got to do is put the sled on here, grab the piece of wood, and drop it on. And now I can just slide this into the blade, and when I stop on that back lip, I can start to pivot it around. So I know for sure that the first time I made a bowl, I used this faceplate to screw onto the base of the bowl, and then that goes onto the drive of the lathe and it turns that way. I wanted to try something different, and this is called a worm screw. And you drill a pilot hole and you can just thread this onto it, and that should be enough to hold it in place and turn it, and then I'll bring up the tailstock. If this doesn't work, if it does decide to start to come loose, I can always go back to the faceplate. That's why I wanted to try this first. I think I'm going to chip away just a little bit of the bark here at the back end so that I have a little bit better contact point for the tailstock when I bring that up. Yeah, that makes me feel better. guys, this was supposed to be a little one-night quick win sort of project. I was just going to come in here, make a bowl, and be done with it and feel good about it. And now it's about 3 weeks later, and I'm finally getting back to it. So when we left off, I had been pouring resin in sort of a mold made of tape around this thing, and I've got these big plasticky wings sticking off that'll be really difficult to turn off smoothly on the lathe. So I'm going to trim it up here at the bandsaw first, and then we'll go back to turning. Well, here is the end result. It ended up smaller than I wanted it to be. I thought that piece of wood would have been big enough to handle a bigger bowl, but I kind of misplaced where I cut the round out of it in the beginning, and then I turned it down a little bit more than I wanted to try to get rid of some of the ugly gap in it that I didn't really like. If I were doing it all over again with the exact same piece of wood, I don't think I would even pour the resin at all. I would just let it be a void in there. My thinking with the resin was that it was going to be completely clear and you would see all of that topography down inside this. But the resin I used was a little bit old, so it set up too quickly and didn't let the bubbles get out. So it's a little bit cloudy because of the bubbles. I'm not sure if you can actually see that there. I sanded it a lot with that micro mesh stuff to try to get it ultra glossy and smooth, and it still has scratches in it. And then on top of that, as soon as that wet resin touched the very, very dry and porous wood, it went from a light, almost white colored wood to dark and black. And so at a distance, it's still really neat. It's a cool, cool bowl, and the rest of the grain and the gnarliness from that burl, like even looking at the inside, there's just so much character in this thing that I am happy with it. But like I said at the beginning, this was going to be a learning experience for me, and I learned what I would do differently the next time with this exact same piece of wood. So anyway, I think that about covers everything I wanted to say about it, and I hope you guys enjoyed this one. It was a little bit different format than usual, and I thought it was kind of fun. Let me know what you guys think. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.